Well, you never know when something that you've done long time ago is positively impacting people out in the world, driving what they do and helping them organize their lives. That was brought to my attention on today's episode of the Try Life On podcast. Hope you guys are well. For context, today is Wednesday, July 31st. It is roughly 1 p.m. in the afternoon. I'm recording this intro to tell you about my friend, Sally Mohammed. Sally is an amazing soul. She is living in Paris. She's been living in France for the past 18 years. She's Palestinian and moved up to France quite some time ago when she was 18 years old. And I ran into Sally on social media because I went through her profile on LinkedIn and she screamed to me of what I was when I was in corporate, knowing that I needed to do something different. And she screams to me of what a lot of you are trying to do out in the world, which is you're fine, happy, or maybe even not happy in your corporate role, nonprofit role, entrepreneurial role, business owner role, whatever it is, and your soul, your spirit, your subconscious is driving you to do something different. You feel odd about it. You're not taking a leap of faith. Thereby, you're sitting in quiet desperation, knowing that you want to try life on a very different way, and you're looking for some motivation to get it done. Sally ran into the exact same thing. She is a former Google executive, former Microsoft executive. And when she was in the corporate space, it's not that she didn't like corporate. In the same vein that I worked 25 years at Accenture and in the police and in the military. I loved what I did, but there was always some misalignment on the fact that I wanted to be other things in the world, go other places in the world. I acted on those things instinctively. I think it's very hard for other people to act on them instinctively. And as Sally told me today, that's what happened with her. She almost brought me to a little bit of emotion during the conversation because she said to me that she was on the train in France. I'm pulling something up. She was on the train in France, in Paris, and she happened to listen to my podcast that was recorded with a friend of mine by the name of Adam Coelho. And Adam had me on his Mindful Fire podcast. And I republished that as part of the Try Life On community as Try Life On episode 19 on August 11th, 2023, where I talked about the philosophy. It was the early philosophy because it's evolved since then, but the philosophy of trying life on, the philosophy of drafting your perfect day so you understand the emotion of the style of life that you want to have, and then building the personal work framework and the business or employment framework that matches that personal framework, which in theory, as long as you do inspired action to get rid of any of the blockers getting you there, which in theory would help you create the framework for the perfect day or for your perfect life. Well, nobody will ever have a perfect day or a perfect life forever, but you can certainly have the framework to get it done. And when Sally heard that conversation, I guess she caught me and Adam talking about it across our social media platforms. One day she happened to listen to it. She was on the train listening to it. Something happened to her while she was listening to it that said, I really need to get into this. She got off the train, went into a coffee shop, and a few hours later, because of that podcast interview, and I'm so grateful she told me that, her life changed. She decided to make a bunch of changes, and it all manifested in her now having left corporate, started her own business, and is very, very aligned and in tune to the way that she's living, to include being an amazing mom, a beautiful wife, and one of those global citizens that I feel honored to meet. So if you are going to listen to this conversation, I don't like when I say interviews, but if you're going to listen to this conversation, a pre-conversation to listen to would be podcast episode 19, Try Life On episode 19 with Adam Coelho, which was published on August the 11th. And you'll hear what Sally heard that drove her to make changes, and then come back to this conversation and really dig in because her life has changed dramatically. And I know she's going to be listening to this intro. I want her to know, and as well, you guys to realize that sometimes when you do things and you put good information out there, one person can grab that and radically change their life because of the information. So put good info out there. You never know who you're going to affect. And if you're lucky, the way that I was lucky today, Sally told me about it. I had no idea that I impacted her life the way that she expresses during this conversation, and the fact that she forwarded that information to 25 people that she knew about so they could go ahead and try life on their way, leveraging the information. So I think this is a wonderful interview of an amazing human who went from corporate, and she enjoyed corporate, to moving into the emotional intelligence, emotional IQ space, to starting her own business in the coaching space, to partnering with world-class organizations in behavioral science. Man, it's a good one. It is a great example of somebody who took a leap of faith, jumped, built the airplane on the way down, and is just trying life on her way. And I feel honored to have met her. The funny thing is, she knew me. I didn't know her. It's just that what she was talking about on social media attracted my attention. It drew me to her. I asked her to come on the podcast, and then she told me all this stuff that I've been affecting her life for a year and a half, whatever it is. Man, we are all a global community. We should all be helping each other in this way. Great that I helped her with a previous interview. She helped me today, understanding that my words and my efforts to help people try life on are out there impacting people. And I hope similarly for you, this conversation with my friend Sally impacts you. If you have any feedback for me, please send me a message to Maurice at trylifeon.com. As always, if this information is helping you, I would appreciate a 5-star review so the podcast can find its way into more hands like Sally, who can change their life with the information. I hope her information is going to change your life, and I'm sure that it will. Try Life On with my friend Sally Mohammed. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Where are you?
Paris.
You're in Paris today. Okay. I'm supposed to be in Paris 2.5 weeks from today.
Are you kidding me?
No.
I'll take you out for coffee.
Oh, I would love it. That would be great.
Of course.
That would be great. It's good to meet you.
It's so good to meet you. I mean, you can't even imagine. Honestly, I'm so happy. I'm anchoring this as I speak.
I love it. Well, let me tell you why. First of all, I went back to look at our messaging, because I was like, when did I connect with Sally? I couldn't remember. And it was back in May.
Yeah.
It was way back in May. And I remember you commented on a post that I did or something. And sometimes I try to go look to see where people are from and what they do to get a feel for people, just quietly in the back. And then I read your story and I was like, what? This needs to be told. This needs to be told. So thank you for your patience in my scheduling and all that type of stuff. Sometimes it can be a little bit crazy, but I really appreciate that you would spend some time with me.
Well, I really appreciate this. Spending time with you is a joy. And in that story, you have a role, and I'll tell you all about that role.
I have a role. Okay, we'll
you have a role.
Let me tell you a little bit about the context of why I wanted you to come on, the context of my podcast. And I'm learning too, right? Like every time I put out content or interviews, I get feedback, and I'm learning kind of what people are trying to do. And a lot of my listenership, they are corporate people. They are the Sallys and Maurices who started at the Googles, the Microsofts, the Accentures, went into the work world with all kinds of aspirations, because that's what formal education drove us to think. That's the way it kind of drove us to think about life. But they are at a crossroads. A lot of people are at a crossroads where and people confuse some of the things that I say as that I hate corporate or hate the 9-to-5. I don't, actually. I was there for 25 years happily, right? But people are at a crossroads of they want to feel something different in life. They want to engage in their passions. They want to jump to this particular venture or whatever. And they're nervous. They're nervous. They're scared. Their EQ and their IQ takes a hit. They're looking for ways to do it. And I think where the Try Life On podcast has been really cool is giving people examples of folks around the world, men, women, white, brown, yellow, red, doesn't matter to me, gender, anything, I don't care, of folks who have the similar thoughts and what they have done and what journey they went on and what catalytic event happened to them that pushed them to make a jump and start building the airplane on the way down. So when I read your story, which we'll get into, I was like, that's an amazing story. and she's not from the US. I want to see more people. I'm technically US based, but I spend a lot of time in the Mideast. I spend a lot of time in France and what have you, because I know your background a bit. But it's just good to get a breadth of people. But that's why I wanted you to come on, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. It's honestly one podcast interview that you gave to Adam Coelho. He's a Googler. He has
Adam, I remember.
I think his podcast name is Mindful Fire. And that podcast changed my life.
Really?
Yeah. And I've been following you for years, but that was, I think, it was everything. I was in that sweet spot,
Yeah.
I had aspired for change, but I was also ready to go for the change. And I listened to your podcast, and it was one entire hour of you. It was not a post, it was not text, it was one entire hour of hearing you talk. And it was like a coaching session for me. So I tell you, you have a role to play. I even know the date I listened to that podcast. Like, this is exciting because I'm very happy to be here today and to be able to tell that story with that premises, right? I was in that space of, I want that. I love what he's talking about. I just don't know if I can have it. And then thinking, maybe I shift that, and I just ask myself how I can have it.
Oh, so this was before you had left corporate and all that type of stuff? No way.
And you didn't know. I know you didn't know.
No. You make me happy by saying that, and I think anyone would have this reaction. But you put stuff out there with the genuine intent of trying to help people, and sometimes feedback doesn't come back.
I know.
And you don't know if your efforts and waking up at 4 a.m. to get some things done is getting out there. So to hear you say that makes me happy. And I remember that interview with Adam very well. I do. Yeah.
And I tell everyone, I mean, people in my close group know your name. I tell them that podcast that he gave changed my life. So your work matters. I just wanted to start by saying that it really does. And so each of us have their own journey and our own timeline.
Yeah.
But when we come, I really insist on always giving credit where credit is due. When I see the light, I always say, this coach helped me, this person, this podcast, this interview. I shared that interview that you gave, I think, 25 times.
Wow. Okay. Well, that genuinely makes me happy. Thank you for saying that. And I have a feeling that this interview is going to be one or this conversation, I don't do interviews. It's just a conversation. This conversation is going to be one that's going to help a lot of people too. So
I hope so.
Yeah. Give a little intro on, I know your story, but let's start wherever you feel is beneficial, because I know you're on quite a ride. So I don't know where you like to enter, whether it's at the end, in the middle, the beginning, doesn't matter to me. But give a little bit of intro on who you are and kind of where you are and what's going on in life, and we'll go from there.
Okay. So I was born in Palestine. I lived 18 years there. And when I was 18, I got a merit scholarship and I was able to travel to France. It was a super exciting time, but back then I just thought I'd study and go back home. And then I realized, and I think that was the first big decision I had to take, first lifestyle design I had to take, was to ask myself, do I go back because that's what people do after they study, or do I stay? And I decided to stay. I started working at Microsoft. When I was doing my master's, they were hiring. I applied. I got in. I worked there a few years in EMEA roles mostly. I loved those years. I got to travel. I was not very familiar with traveling before then. I got to work with different cultures. I was in international teams. It was really, I would say, the highlight, the period I enjoyed the most of my career in tech.
Wow.
And from Microsoft, I don't like the word hunted, but that's what we used to say back then. I was hunted on LinkedIn for a job at Google. And I started working at Google, I think it was 2017. I worked in French teams, so that job was a little bit more local. And I worked there for a few years. And it was one company I had dreamt of joining. And I'm saying this because it's important for how the story ends. When I was young, it was just a dream to work for these big tech corporations. And it just seemed like a very, 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 very far dream. So
Yeah.
by the time I joined Google, I was just in this space of gratefulness. I'm in, like I don't even know how I got here, but I'm here. And
Hmm.
as I remember, as time passed and then COVID happened, I remember having moments where I was asking myself, what is this the right spot? Is this where I'm supposed to be?
Hmm.
And I love the colleagues I had. I had really incredible colleagues, very smart people. A lot of them had different backgrounds. It was amazing. But I remember I was 31 back then. Every day I would just be in back-to-back meetings.
Yep.
I would be either selling something or supporting people on delivering something. I was very happy about being in contact with the people and having so many different projects. I'm a very curious person. I love to learn. But there was that space and I was wondering, what am I doing here? And is this it? Is this,
Yeah.
as far as I can get? And not even in terms of achievement, but in terms of just joy and feeling challenged, intellectually challenged. And I had a really good manager in the first job I had there. I told him, I'm just having all these questions. I'm just wondering if this is it. If I'm just supposed to be in meetings, just like doing slides and doing this back to back until the day ends. I feel like something is missing. And he was a
Yep.
really good manager. So he asked back then, what is missing? And I said, I just don't know. I'm not traveling anymore. I'm not
But how
meeting
did he know
people.
that? How did he know that? Did you
I told him.
you told him that something
Yeah.
was off?
Yeah. I told him something is missing. I don't know. I feel like something is missing. I'm happy, but it's not enough. And he asked, what do you need for it to be enough? And I said, I'm not traveling. I'm not traveling. I don't feel like I'm learning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I feel like something is missing. I feel like I'm just, doing slides and doing meetings and it doesn't feel like enough. And so he asked me, what if you went to learn something new and you brought it back to the team? And I
Nice.
was like, yes, and
I
yes,
like
and
him.
yes.
I don't
I
even know
like
him, and
him
I like
too.
him. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
He's into
His name is Fernando,
her.
and I'm probably gonna share the podcast with him. So
Okay.
I'm saying his name.
That's what's
He
up.
was he was a great, great manager. And so he approved for me to go to a training in London, and I chose a training on neuroscience. And
Wow.
during that training, we talked about emotional intelligence, the
Yep.
neuroscience of change, just many, many things. And I remember it was 2 days. And Maurice, I just felt so, so, so re energized. I felt like life was put into my body, like all over again. I
Mm-hmm.
felt excited. I felt energized. Most people who had been attracted to the same training were also super interested. It's a
Mm-hmm.
pretty well known training. It's called Search Inside Yourself. And it was built in Google by a Googler. And then it just was so successful that he ended up leaving Google and creating a foundation that delivers this training full time.
Wow.
And in this training, they speak about now because it's a whole foundation. They speak about mindfulness, they speak about neuroscience, they speak about emotional intelligence. I went back and I told Fernando, I am in love with this world. I am in love with this world. It makes so much sense. And of course, I gave a sort of like an overview of the training with my team. But I remember that was the first time I just experienced joy while being in a space that my mind recognized as a workspace.
Mm.
I was not doing a hobby, it was not a sport, it was not a dance class. It still felt like work, but
Yep.
it felt like work I could enjoy so much.
Yep.
And that was in 2018. And that was when the seed was planted for me.
Yep.
And then I just moved on, working with Google and just having that thought in mind. So every time there was another training on the topic, I would apply to see if I could
Take
get
it.
it via Google. And if it was not via Google, I'd pay and go. And I was just, pursuing that path.
Yeah.
And then I remember 2019, Daniel Goleman, who speaks a lot about emotional intelligence and who is known as the first person to have democratized it, he posted on LinkedIn that he's going to be training a few coaches
Oh.
on this specific topic. And he opened applications. And I remember I was just sitting in this coffee shop outside of the Google office in Paris doing more slides. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna go for this one. I don't know who's gonna pay. I don't know who's gonna cover this, but I'm taking this one. I just need to
Yeah.
apply. I
Yeah.
applied,
Yeah.
I got in, and
Wow.
I went to the US for the first residency of that training. I had just an absolutely fun time. And then
Wow.
COVID happened.
Wow.
And
Where
so
did you
the
go in the
whole,
US? Where was the training in the
it was
US?
in Florida.
It was in Florida.
It
Okay.
was in Florida. It was a residency. People from all around the globe flew in. We had just
Yeah.
amazing speakers, teachers, coaches. It was just fantastic. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember that feeling, it was 10 days. It was very intense,
Mm-hmm.
but I did not feel any form of fatigue or I was not tired. And I was like, but I'm in back-to-back meetings, but they did not feel like the other meetings. We
Mm-hmm.
were doing slides, but they did not feel like the other slides. So something felt different.
Yeah.
Like specifically, something felt different. And I was still unable to name it. But I just started thinking if this was a tech conference and I had to do 10 days,
It wouldn't have worked.
it would be too much.
it,
There
it
would
would
be a
it
point
wouldn't work.
where.
Is that what you would refer to as, because I do, but would you refer to that as you were aligned? You were in alignment with what you were working on?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And
felt light.
you felt light.
I felt light. I felt, I remember Oprah the first time she used this word, enlightened.
Yep.
I just started to think about the metaphor of feeling enlightened. And I was learning things. And I mean, Google and Microsoft are amazing companies, just like Accenture was. You learn a lot in those
Oh
companies.
yeah, of course. Of
But I
course.
was feeling like I was learning things that were going to make my life different.
That's right. That's right.
And like my whole person, not just like my work personality, no, just as a whole human being, I felt that I was experiencing some things and that I was going to be able to use those things for life.
And I want to I resonate with your journey because of stuff that happened to me, but I want to call out one, your manager. What was your manager's name? First name?
Fernando.
Fernando. What's up? Fernando, I know you're going to listen to this, and what's up, brother? But I want to call his courage out, and I want to call your courage out, as a means to kind of express something to the folks that are listening. I think sometimes when we get a gut feeling about something or a thought about something, because it's us, because Maurice is thinking something about himself or Sally is thinking something about herself, we deny the greatness of that feeling or that thought. We do it all the time. If we don't get a piece of advice from some guru or from some podcast or from some book or whatever, we dismiss it. And the one thing that I noticed is you didn't dismiss your feelings. You had enough courage to be able to talk to Fernando and say something is off. So I want to call that out, because in my journey I felt something off as well. And for me, it was when I was at Accenture. The police thing will come up later. But when I was at Accenture, I was working for federal government clients, no problem. But I'm a traveler, not for the sake of I want to see everything in this world, but for the sake of I like to be in constant learning. I like to feel different cultures. I like to speak different languages. I like to go to Paris and learn that you can buy these things at the tabac, right? Like I like those things. And because I was working for federal government clients in the US, you couldn't take your laptop out of the country. You had to physically be in the office every day. You were working. I'm grateful for governments. We need them. But let's be honest, people who come into government, unless they are workers, let's say officials, they're coming in for 2, 3, 4 year stints. So their level of ownership of what they're doing is very superficial. So you're working with all these folks and they don't have as much care to the process that you have. And you're like, why am I here? So I did exactly like you. To give a second example, I what I did was, one of the Try Life On principles is I started asking better questions the way that you did. And I created from scratch, from my imagination. I created a position, presented it to a potential boss, and I ended up being virtual and supporting teams around the world in like 10 countries instead of having to sit in offices in DC. I
Wow.
want to bring that out because folks that are listening, they may not have picked up on the fact that there's got to be some courage that comes from down deep, internal within, to like talk to Fernando, make up a role, go talk to your boss about this, say it's not okay, but listen to your gut, which is exactly what you did.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we would be surprised by the changes that we can create just by having conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
was a very shy and introverted person first 28 years of my life. And it was that EMEA team in Microsoft that got me to travel. And I also had amazing managers in that team. I
Yeah.
had two
Yeah.
managers,
Yeah.
Luca and Mikkel. Both of them were incredible. And they really always encouraged me to get out of my comfort zone. And they always, I remember both of them said, we have your back. So go ahead and
Mhm.
fail. And once I started just experiencing that, I was never, I mean, up until today, I'm not able to just put myself in a space where I'm not going to try something new. I'm not going to try to
Yep.
speak up. I'm not going to try to change something. And
Yep.
I really think it's a habit. Being vocal, it's a habit. I I did not have it for 28 years. I did
Mm.
not, it was a lot for me, and I'm highly empathetic. So it was a lot for me to say that something is off, because then I would worry that this person, Mikkel, Luca, Fernando, would think that we're managers, that I'm not happy in this team, that this is a poor team, that I don't like my job. I had all these, polluting thoughts that, if you speak up, these are all the bad things that could happen. But now I just trust myself and trust the people around me, that we are all emotionally intelligent and
Of
that we can
course.
have these conversations and that something good can come out of the conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But people have gotta they gotta listen to their gut. They have to have courage and go. And what I would tell people is that might feel risky. Our brains, as you know from emotional intelligence work, but our brains are something that will take us back to relative safety. You
Yeah.
can rewire that. You can learn that it's okay to jump. It's okay to take a risk. I even say that the biggest risk in life is not taking one.
Oh
Some,
gosh, I absolutely agree.
we
One of
have
uh, one of the
yeah.
best sayings that I love is, I think it was something like, if you think risk is dangerous, try routine, it's lethal. I just believe in that so deeply.
Yeah, we're not trees. It's okay
No.
to pick up and go. So you ended up taking all this training, got into this emotional intelligence space. I'll call out again that it started to resonate with you and you felt aligned with the work that you were doing rather
Yeah.
than just doing the tech work at, the Microsoft or Google tech work, whatever. But what happened then? What happens after you start ingesting, let's say, emotional intelligence work as something that you want to do?
Well, something happened, and that big thing is COVID.
COVID.
So
Okay.
I had my first residency. I was so excited. I was so happy. I remember that feeling. And then COVID happened, and the French president said, we are at war, and you're gonna all stay home, no more traveling. I remember, like, the only thing I worried about was my parents, because they were
Yeah.
back in the Middle East. And my first thought was, oh gosh, I hope they're gonna be okay and that we're gonna be able to see each other soon. My second thought was my residency. I'm not gonna be able to go to the US and do my second residency. And so at the foundation, I think they also were really shocked. I mean, we were all under a lot of shock. So at first they said, we're going to pause the program. And then
Mhm.
everyone was so disappointed. So they said, okay, we're going to do it, but remotely. Everyone was so disappointed. There were a lot of emotions. People had invested a lot of money. It was a 12-month program divided into four
Oh,
residencies
wow.
of 10 days.
Wow.
So I
Yeah.
think all of us had to do a lot of navigating in that space. And I got pregnant. And I remember, like, that year, just everything, literally everything happened. And
Hmm.
I remember one evening, so I worked the whole day and I'm, doing my job at Google. I had transitioned to a new role and I was managing partners.
Yeah.
And in the evening, from I think it was 7 or 8 p.m., I would be taking my remote residency until midnight. I was pregnant. My pregnancy was a tough one. And so one day my husband says, I'm just really at awe, like, seeing you finish a full day work remotely while
Mm.
being pregnant and then just take like those 5 calls. And he said, you know what's really strange? I remember asking what? He said, you look so happy.
Yeah. I love it.
And that was the first time, Maurice, that I, had like a big aha moment thinking, he's right. Because
Yeah.
these are calls, they are
Yeah.
remote. I'm a
Yeah.
morning person. I'm not an evening person. I love to wake up early and start my day early. I'm not, it's very rare that you'll see me like up until 1 or 2 a.m. And so
Hmm.
he was like, you look happy. Like, this is late and you're speaking English and like you're doing all these calls. Like, and I remember just looking at him and saying, but I am happy.
You
It's
found it. You
exactly
found
how I
your it.
feel.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think having both at the same time allowed me to see things for what they were. When I was traveling, there was the thrill of the travel. I mean, the US and the
Yep,
residency and the people.
of course.
So, in a way, it was difficult to say, how can I not be happy? But now I was doing
Yep.
something I had aspired to do in a different way, in a different form, on a different timeline with different hours.
Yep.
Everything had changed, but my joy hadn't.
It's tough for people to find that though. It's
It
very,
is very
it's
tough.
really, so, I want to acknowledge like your experience doing the tech work and then your residency at the same time is akin to my experience being
Yeah.
a full-time exec at Accenture and then a police officer in the middle of the night. It never felt like work to me. I would be tired on occasion, and then I would use my paid time off strategically to catch up on sleep and things of that nature. But people are like, how do you work 24, 48 hours straight? My
Mm.
answer is because it wasn't work.
Yeah, I didn't
I
feel
was
like
just executing a purpose, what I felt like I was here to do. And that is why I go back to the statement that I made earlier that sometimes you have to take risk on yourself.
oh yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you agree, but
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I learned these past 4 years is that we forget how to feel alive.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm here, right? My body's here, my mind is here, but only a few things make me feel really alive. It's
Mm-hmm.
when I'm loving someone, it's when I'm receiving love, it's when I'm laughing really hard, or I'm
Mm-hmm.
learning something and my mind goes, whoa, I had no idea. Like, those are the things that make me feel alive. And I remember that year and just that first training in 2018, and I felt alive. I was just, not moving from point A to point B and just, yeah, I mean, accumulating things. I was really, I remember the
Or
sentences
alive.
we said. I was alive and I had no effort to put. That also is one other thing. And I spoke about this a lot with the foundation. And someone said something so beautiful to me. I said, I just feel so alive. I just feel so happy. And the person told me, you're in the flow. And I was like, what
You
is,
are.
yeah,
You
like,
you you are, and I'm curious. So I 1,000% agree with you, and I'm curious your reaction to the following statement, given
mm,
your training
mm,
and your experience, and then who you are as a person. I'm under the fundamental belief that when, for example, my lifestyle design coaching, we're not really looking, at least I'm not looking for things and places. As much as I say I'm in Maryland, then I'll be in Lebanon, then I'll be in Paris. And it's not the places or the things, or it's not the places or the people, it's the things. It's the feelings that you get
mm,
from doing it. So the police officer thing, yeah, I was tired, but I felt alive the way that you say that. It's weird when I see police cars go by my house here in Maryland because it's the agency that I used to work for. I get sad because I miss backing up my homies and the homettes when I used to do it and stuff.
yeah.
But I'm just curious your thought process on the emotions around life versus the things we are told to go get.
Yeah, I mean, I'm aligned. I am totally aligned because I think children know how to feel alive. They really
Yes.
do. I
They
have
do.
a 3-year-old and gosh, she knows how to feel alive. Like, she does say, but I don't want to do that. It's not fun. Why are we doing this? Or why do we have to? She keeps on asking, why do we have to go here or why do we have to do that? And
Yeah.
I think just as adults, we have conditioned ourselves so much to not listening to our gut, our mind, our body. Could be, we could call it whatever, whatever feels comfortable, but
Yep.
I just feel like we become bad at listening, and we become so good at executing. We become great at planning, but just experiencing things. So when you say it's not about being in that space, it's about the emotions. I am totally aligned. Since COVID and that year, and the year after was also tough. I returned from my maternity leave and I had a baby plus work. I remember thinking I can do all of it, so I'm just gonna pause the coaching. So I had already been certified, had already taken clients with the foundation, but everything felt like too much. My daughter was not sleeping full nights. And literally after 6 months, I burnt out. And I went from feeling fully alive
Mm.
to just literally fully exhausted, fully burnt, fully
Sorry,
exhausted.
when you
No more
when you
light.
went back to corporate work, you mean? You
Corporate
went back
work,
full
baby, post
full
COVID,
on, and then mom, corporate, post COVID in
and
the
no
office.
coaching. And no coaching.
You're away from the things that made you feel good in the first place.
Exactly. And it took me time to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
I was resisting at first. I was like, hey, I've done this for, 11 years. I'm great at this. I'm a key talent, like, all that kind of crap that your mind tells you. I can do this. What is a baby? It's like, it's just, this tiny human being. I can do this. Coaching, it's a very nice side hustle, but for now, Sally, you need to park it. And then I was like, hey, I remember what it feels like to feel alive. And this doesn't feel alive. This feels just like my body is moving and my heart is not. I can't. And I remember having all of these, confusing emotions. And I think I was telling my friend this morning, once you have experienced freedom, once you have experienced creativity, once you have experienced purpose, it is very hard to go back to
You
settling.
can't unsee it. You can't unsee it, and you can't unfeel it.
Wow, that's a good one. You cannot unfeel it.
You can't unfeel it. I when I do post, I'm always posting, like, let's say, the general process that I use to coach people in lifestyle design.
Yeah.
And I make this statement because I think it's true, because I
Mhm.
know people who are still in corporate who tell me it's true.
Yeah.
That feeling that you had is what I call quiet desperation. I,
Yeah.
I think there are there are millions of people who are sitting in corporate, sitting in government, sitting in nonprofit, entrepreneurs. It doesn't matter where it is, but there are people who are sitting in quiet desperation because they are misaligned and they can't find their way out. But the problem is they're so hunkered down by the opinions of, or the fear of opinions of peers, coworkers, neighbors, family telling them,
Absolutely.
don't do this. Sally, don't leave Microsoft to become a full-time EQ, IQ coach. Don't, that's crazy. Why would you do? And then everyone in the universe and society puts all their fears on you, and you don't make that shift. And the thing in my journey, and I'm curious about this for you, the thing that in my journey that I realized in reflection that I did very well, although it caused me some mental issues, was that I was very quiet my entire journey. I
Mm.
didn't share a lot that I was executive and a federal agent and a police officer and doing all this real estate. And I just
Mm.
quietly kind of trucked along because I was fearful of people's opinions diverging me a different
Yeah.
direction, you know?
Yeah.
How did you make the final jump of leaving corporate to, my assumption is you're a full-time coach now, but how did that final jump occur? And did you have to kind of fight opinions or fears in doing that?
Well, you're going to laugh because you have a role to play, and I know that you don't know it. But
Yeah.
you
What
do
did I
have
do?
a role to play. 2022 is the year I burnt out. Now I talk about it in a very open way because when I realized I was not okay, I don't feel alive, things are not working. I decided to step out of my role, and I sent an email to my division. After my coaching degree, I started working with managers and employees at Google and applying the coaching of emotional and social intelligence. So I was stepping out from that role that I had kind of created for myself, plus my real role of partner management. And I
Mhm.
just said my truth. I said, I'm not okay. I don't feel alive. I really need to recenter and I'm going to step out and I'm just going to really just focus on one priority, which is taking care of myself, taking care of my daughter, reconnecting with whatever makes me happy. And I
Mhm.
had 158 answers to that email. And the answers were literally, most people replied all. So, like the whole division saw these answers. And a lot of answers were, you have so much courage. How could you come to such strong conclusions at your age? Thank you so much for being vocal. Like the messages really touched my heart. And all of a sudden, I think that was the first time I realized it's not me on a unique journey. I'm a human being and I'm literally figuring life out. And I'm probably on the verge of making a big change.
Mhm.
And so I think the first time I realized that this is Sally, this is not you. It's not you poorly managing something or, like not being productive enough or whatever crap my mind was trying to tell me. I mean, we were a division of 400 people, 158 answers. What else do you need? You might. Like, I remember just sitting with myself, seeing those answers and thinking, whoa. And so the first months, I was just only focused on recovering, taking care of myself, my mental health, and understanding why I got into that space. And that space is what I call now with my clients the space when you're disconnected. So I talk about feeling disconnected from myself in the sense that I love my daughter. I had no experience with children before. She was my first child. I literally really loved being with her. I took 8 months without being paid to take care of her when she was born.
Mm.
And that year that I burnt out, waking up to take care of her felt like a burden. You know, when she would cry in her room and I would need to open my eyes and go check on her, or my husband would need to check on her, I remember my first thoughts like, oh.
Mm.
And so that was one first warning. The second warning is I love my parents. I mean, they are the most important people in my life. And every time I had to call them and check on them because they live in a very, very, very tough space, I
They're
remember
in
thinking,
Palestine?
they're still in Palestine. They live in East Jerusalem. So every time I would call them, I'd be like, oh no, I have to call them. It's this day. And so all these small things started showing up for me. And those were the warning signs that I could not, I did not see them for what they were. I just thought, I'm tired. I need rest. I need a long weekend. I need more sleep. But it was none of those things. I was totally disconnected from what mattered. So what mattered were my people, my partner, my husband. It was my daughter. It was my parents. It was my friends. So I was totally disconnected, just focused on getting the job done because I had Google was having a lot of announcements that year. I had an important portfolio of partners. So I was just so focused, like deadlines, deadlines, deadlines. And in my email, I told them I disconnected from myself. Like I'm so focused on human made deadlines, I'm missing on life deadlines. I have a less than a 2 year old. My parents, I mean, like they're over 60. I just should be focused on what really matters. And so
Yeah.
that email had resonated with so many people and it surprised me in a way I could not have literally like guessed. And
Wow.
then I remember thinking, Sally, this is not about you. You're not just like one single human being going through one single experience. This is bigger. But I was still unable to say how. And so I just focused on recovering for a few months. And then I realized I was not doing anything that was making me happy.
Mm.
I was, even my daughter, the time I spent with her, I was, taking her, bathing her, giving her food. Like we were not having any kind of fun. I was not trying a new experience with her. And then I realized, okay, this is what I need to do. I'm going to start by doing more of what makes me happy. So on the list, I started writing what made me happy. And that's where you intervene. You gave that podcast with Adam Coelho, and you were talking about designing the perfect day. I remember that exercise.
Yes. Yes.
Design the perfect work day, design the perfect weekend, design the perfect week. And from these designs, try to understand what your framework looks like. And I was like, what framework? So I started writing the things. I listened to your podcast. I was in the metro, like the metros in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
It was noisy, like all the smells and everything. So I went, sat in a coffee shop, asked someone for a piece of paper and a pen, and I started writing as you were speaking. And then it hit me. And I was like, Sally, you're not living in the framework that you need right now. You're living in the framework that you needed 5 years ago. And it was great.
Wow.
But it's not working anymore. You changed. You discovered coaching.
You're a
You
different
love
person.
neuroscience. I'm a new person. I had become a mom. Like so much had changed. And I remember like just sitting in that coffee shop crying and realizing, now I understand what happened. Now I know why I burned out. I was taking in too much, not enough of what was making me happy or what would help me feel alive. And you know what made me feel so confused, Maurice? I dreamt of joining Google. I remember being 14, being just a really young girl and thinking, I'm going to work for Bill Gates. That's how I was so focused on getting a job at Microsoft. And I remember having, like that poster, do more, do cool things that matter. Like I wanted those jobs. So in a way, my brain was like, you can't, you can't be having those silly thoughts, Sally. This was your dream. Like, look how hard you worked to get this. Why are you trying to, feel badly about it? So that also doesn't help. I mean, even before the outside noise, I had to deal with my own polluting thoughts.
Yeah.
That, Sally, this was the dream. I'm sorry, like this was the dream. And so I did that framework. I still have it. I can send you a photo after this
Wow.
podcast.
I would love to see it actually.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. And in that framework, I said, I don't want to be commuting 2 hours a day. I don't want to be going to an office every day. I just love people, but I don't need to be around people 24 hours. Like, I would love space. I don't want to miss putting my daughter to sleep. I don't want to wake up in the morning feeling exhausted by the thought of being with my only child. Like, I wrote those things. I
Wow.
remember writing, I want to
Wow.
have time to call my parents. I don't want a life where I have so many meetings. I can't take 5 minutes to check on my parents. That life doesn't work. And so I started listing those things and I was like, well, okay, now I have to make this happen. So that was last year. I still remember the date.
Wow.
It was 21st of March last year. And I was sitting in that coffee and thinking, okay, this is it. This is what, this is the plan. This is what needs to happen. Now, how do you take it from here?
Did the universe just put that? Was that a random occurrence that you happened to be listening to Adam's podcast, or you were aware of it?
I was following you on LinkedIn, and you mentioned that you had spoken on that podcast. You mentioned, and then he mentioned you as well.
Oh.
And so this is why LinkedIn posts work way, way more than we can imagine. I had never listened to his podcast before. I was just following you, and you and him talked about, he spoke about having you as a host, as a guest, and him being a host. I know.
Awesome.
And I told you, I told you on a LinkedIn message, I told you, I send that podcast to 25 people I know. Wow. I was like, listen to this. This is a coaching session, free coaching session. Take it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I think as a coach, it's just my way of telling you, the work that you do matters. It can really change a life.
Yeah, I'm actually a little bit emotional about it because when I left policing, and I won't lose the thread of where you are, I know where you are, but when I left policing, when I left the military, I was lost. In the same vein that you talk about when you had your daughter and then you started to go back to work and something was way off. Something was just off. I'll never forget October 2019, I'm sitting in a car, October 6, 2019, I'm sitting in a car, and at 5 p.m. I officially became retired out of the military. And I just sat there crying in a car by myself. And then when I left the police department in September 30th, 2021, I didn't cry, but I felt this massive loss because at the time, those were my worlds to give to community. Yeah. And I was like, what am I going to do? It wasn't that I didn't lose my identity. I lost the vehicles that I had to help a lot of people. So then I leaned into more real estate and more affordable housing for people. That's great, but I don't get feedback from like the residents who live in my apartment buildings. I don't get a lot of feedback from them directly. Yeah. But when you give me this feedback relative to what I talk about with Try Life On and stuff, it gives me a lot of joy because, as I told you before, I wake up, I think about a post. I don't schedule anything. I'm always organically just thinking on the spot. Yeah. Coach people, put stuff out, and you hope you're helping people, and you just don't know. You're telling me that on 21 March 2023, you listened to something that I said, and it changed the trajectory of your life and maybe 25 other people. That's a lot for me to take in. I appreciate that. That's awesome. And I know you just did it literally without any kind of, objective or goal in mind. You were just sharing your truth. Yeah. Yeah. And that's where it feels good. So where is your truth today? If you went back to work, it wasn't feeling good. And I think a lot of people have this feeling now. And then you clearly know that the coaching and the emotional intelligence work that you had learned about, and maybe you were doing a little bit of coaching on the side as a hustle. Yeah, as a hustle. Yeah. Where did it all lead? Where are you today? And just reflect on it as well. So last year I was on a leave from Google, an unpaid leave. After I recovered from my burnout and I was feeling okay, I reached out to the foundation I had trained at and I said, hey, would you take me back?
and they were super excited. And so last year I started coaching again, and then I even got into training and mentoring future coaches. And I loved that. I loved teaching. I loved mentoring. I loved
Mm.
being in that cycle of seeing someone grow. By the time my leave ended, my team, my manager reached out to me and started asking me about the next steps for my role and my portfolio. And by then it was very clear in my mind that
It was too
that was
late.
yeah, that was going to be parked for me. And so I just I quit Google at the beginning of this year. I think I'm going to make you very emotional, but I created my company on the same date that I had that thought.
Wow.
That I was going to change my life. I just wanted to make March a very holy month for me. In Palestine, it's the month we celebrate mothers, nature. I mean, just many beautiful things, spring. And so I was like, this is it, Sally. Like this is a virtuous circle. You close it by creating your own company. I shared the information with my colleagues at Google, and I had 220 emails as a response
Wow.
because, again, I shared my truth.
Yeah.
And I said, I know I said I was going to come back. I know I said I was going to just have some time off to recenter, but actually recentering made me discover that there's so much more for me
Yes.
in this world. And I
Yeah.
told them, I said, and I hear you say this a lot on your podcast interviews, so I want to say it too. I loved my years at Google. I loved my years at Microsoft. I met the love of my life at Microsoft. My best friends are all from Google at Microsoft. I loved those companies.
Mm-hmm.
But I also acknowledge today that we had honestly just a very mindless way of working, going, just from meeting to meeting, meeting to meeting. We would do emails during the meetings. We would do, meetings during the emails. I mean, it was just like a big, big, big mess.
Yeah.
There was so much pressure for just literally human-made deadlines. I mean, with everything going on in the world, you just sometimes pause and go,
Why? Yeah. What is all this
why?
for?
Yeah.
Why are we doing all this, right?
Just because
Exactly.
one guy is sitting in one chair and he would like, like an Excel sheet with 350 lines, so many people are going crazy. So I just, I love those companies. I love the values that they taught me.
Mm.
I had a few great managers. I think in 13 years, I had like 12 managers. 5 of them changed my life. So I take all of that with a lot of gratitude. I made a lot of friends. A lot of my clients now are ex-Googlers or Googlers who are planning to quit, or ex-Microsofties or Microsofties who are planning to quit. So in a way, I'm just very, very, very grateful.
Yeah.
And I also acknowledge that for me personally, there was more, and I had tasted a little bit of that, and I was just really fully willing to go in. There was then another phase, but because I think I had taken care of the polluting thoughts in my mind, there was the phase of people announcing this to people. And so people who understood were just those who were very close to me. So those who had observed me go through the burnout.
Yep.
Those
They
who
knew.
saw me looking exhausted, wearing always the same pair of jeans, like my sister, like people who were really, really close to me, they noticed, they knew my husband, my sister, my brothers, like these people they just celebrated with me. We had a party when I said, I'm going
Wow.
to create my company. But
Wow.
for everyone else, I remember the answers like, are you crazy? Who leaves Google? Did you see the economic recession?
Yes.
COVID,
Yeah.
a female entrepreneur, a mom, like all sorts of biases.
But you see what I mean? That's exactly the example that I gave you of people putting their fears on you. And if our world, I fundamentally believe that our world is a function of our thoughts, which is why I practice mental diets and controlling my environment so much.
Yeah,
If those thoughts are getting into you, then your world is going to reflect all those fears that people are putting on you.
absolutely.
That's a great example of that.
Yeah. And, even my parents who I love and to whom I'm super close, I remember my dad saying, but it was your dream. Like you had the poster in the room. And I said, yeah, I know, Dad. The dream changed. I have a new one now.
I got a new one.
And
I
that
got a
was it.
poster. I got a
That was
new.
the conversation. I said, there's a new poster, Dad. It's a new life. I'm good. I'm happy I achieved that dream. I said in my farewell email, the 14-year-old girl in me is super proud. I mean, she's living in France right now. She speaks fluent English, French, and
Yes.
Arabic. She worked
Yeah.
at both Google and Microsoft. I never got to meet Bill Gates. That's like the only thing.
It's okay.
But that 14-year-old, she's She's good.
She's good. She's
Now I
good.
need to take care of the 36-year-old. She has a lot of stuff that she would love to achieve and implement out there. And I'm very happy and anchored about that. And so when people throw, these fears at me, I think it was just like a month or 2 months ago, we met with some of our friends from Microsoft, and a lot of them were like, but you're never going to make the same amount of money. You had such a good salary, like you were a key talent. And we were 15. And I remember looking at them and saying, but I don't think that's the question.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, what's the question? I said, the question is, how much money do I actually want to make? And what do I want to do with it?
Yeah.
I'm out of the race, right? I'm out of the race that this colleague is earning this in the team. That colleague got a promotion. So Sally, you should be also working on one. Like, I'm out of that race.
Yeah.
Now I get to decide.
And I call that people. So same thing with the partners at Accenture. When I was there 20 plus years, you're not a partner. What's wrong with you? Yeah, but what they didn't realize that I was building a real estate portfolio on the outside, traveling to 100 countries, being a street police officer, raising my kids. And I have now gotten to the point where I tell them I was never sorry. I wasn't chasing your version of success. I was chasing my own version of success. And it's no different than your colleagues saying, but you can make a better salary here. For those who are listening, your response can be, or your thought process can be, but that's your version of success.
Yeah.
What I want to do in my life is to be aligned. I want to do the things that make me feel good and make me feel alive on a day-to-day basis, having those emotions and what have you. And just my phrase, be plugged into planet and earth as we were intended to be when we were born.
Yeah.
I wrote it down, not always focusing on human-made deadlines versus our own life deadlines, which is what we've been trained to do, just to focus on those things. So I think that's fantastic. Can you just touch on real quick, just as we're wrapping up, the practicality of you starting a business, online business? My assumption is online business, your coaching. What is that like? How are you
Yeah.
generating revenue? How did you start the business? Because I coach online, obviously, but a lot of people want to do something like that. So maybe just a few practical thoughts on
Yeah.
your
Thank you
business
for
and how it's
asking the
going.
question. I do get it a lot
Yeah.
in DMs on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So I'm not an impulsive person. I think there are different profiles. Now I know, actually, I don't think, but I know that there are different personality traits and different kinds of profiles. So I'm not an impulsive person. I think you can see from the story that I'm telling you that I was
Sure.
always checking in with my emotions and trying to see where I stood. But I'm also a very ambitious person. I'm a very curious person. So for me, from my experience, the hardest part is being in your own head. So figure out all of that, because after that, it just becomes a matter of surrounding yourself with the right people, with the right mindsets, and really being okay with experimentation. For me, last year, I freelanced during the sabbatical part of my leave. And when I say I freelanced, it meant that I didn't take any clients through a private practice. I was coaching for a foundation. So the foundation had their own programs, and it's a beautiful foundation. It's called Beyond Emotional Intelligence, and they train either future coaches or just humans who are interested in that kind of training.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking, I don't have visibility on the amount of money I'm earning because I'm fully dependent on their own funnel. I'm fully dependent on when they run the program and how many people get in. I remember that thought. And I had that thought, I think, somewhere last year in summer. And so I started thinking, if I had to run my own company, I should be aware of that problem, the funnel. So before I started telling people about my project. I started telling people about the burnout as well. And that got me to getting my first clients from my own network. So I had not done any kind of, paid communication, paid publicity. Just people who knew me said, I know someone, she's a coach. She's a coach for emotional intelligence. She had a burnout. So if someone had a burnout, if someone was highly empathetic, if someone had something in common with me, then, my network would tell that person about my company. And then the second thing I did is I started collaborating. So I started writing to other coaches and letting them know that I was quitting Google and doing coaching full time. And that got me 3 paid, really amazing jobs. So some of the coaches were looking for an accredited coach. Some coaches were looking for French speaking coach. Some coaches just wanted someone who had coached people at Google, because I had worked with the managers, right? So I still say it in every training where I'm asked to share my experience, mentor. I keep on saying, putting yourself out there is the only way to actually get stuff happening and, get things coming your way.
Yeah,
If
that's
you don't
it.
let the world know, I'm here, this is the kind of work I do, this is where I'm happy to serve, how would people find you? And I'm a very private person. So before early this year, I had no social network. I had no Facebook account, no Twitter account, no Insta, nothing, like literally
Mm,
nothing. My
mm,
network was just a lot of people that I knew I had connected with. And so
yeah.
I used LinkedIn the last time to get my job at Google in 2017. So I got LinkedIn, I, worked my profile. I started posting to let people know what exactly happened for me. That posting got me into a lot of conversations. So either direct network or extended network. So I just want to insist on that because I had no website. I had no social networks. I only had LinkedIn and I had 5 paying
Yeah.
clients and a corporate training by end of April.
Wow.
And that is the power
Big.
of the network.
Wow.
Nothing else, just the network. And for the other stuff that I was really worried about, I took people. Like, I remember I was so worried about the French bureaucracy, like the taxes, the paperwork. It's France is not as agile as the US when it comes to, creating a business or just like living the dream. It's a kind of a different culture here. So I was thinking, Sally, if
Mm,
you're not willing to right now deep dive and understand how you can create a company, do the taxes, get someone who can.
that's
So
right.
I started asking people around me if they knew an entrepreneur. And that's my husband and another friend got me in touch with two people who got me in touch with their own accounting firms. I compared the offers, asked both to make the best deal they could, and then I picked up one. And now I got them 5 new clients. So I also use that, like
As an
my
as
power of
an as an
networking.
accountant, you mean
Yeah, and
you
accounting, tax, like all sorts of like paperwork that you need to
yeah,
do here in
yeah,
France.
exactly.
Tax collection. I mean, there's
And
a whole
I see. I
process.
think, and I'm glad you're saying these things because
Mm.
we always gotta. I try to get people to the practical. There, yeah, I think the theoretical and the high touch things we were talking about during our conversation are really important. But then there's the practical rubber meets the road, how
Yeah,
you do things. And what you're demonstrating is a principle I talk about a lot, which is stop worrying about the what and find a who.
I
Just
love that.
you don't we don't like I'm not I develop real estate in Cyprus now, right? It's in Greek and Turkish and sometimes English. I don't speak Greek or Turkish. I don't know the business context. I didn't worry about the what. I don't need to be an expert in those things. I just found a lawyer who is.
Mhm.
And I will spend time with that person. My business partner's from there, so I will spend time with him. If you
Mhm.
are trying to do something, you're trying to try life on, you're trying to leave your employer, you're trying to start a business, or even be entrepreneurial, intrapreneurial inside of the business where you work,
Yeah.
we're so quick to think we have to become an expert on everything, and we do not.
We
We can
do.
just find the right who versus thinking about a what forever. What is next for you?
And I love your questions. For me, so far, I have taken clients privately in 101. I work with them for 3 months, and I love that. But again, I wanted to create time and space for myself. And I'm starting to have a nice amount of private clients.
Yep.
And so I started thinking about creating cohorts. And
Yep.
again, I tried to find a marketing partner, someone who can help me create an offer that would start at a specific date where I would have a group of people that I would be coaching and that I would be following up with over, a certain number of months. So now I'm in that process of creating that offer and launching that offer. And then again,
Nice.
I'm doing that because I want the time. I want to still be able to. I did this like this morning. I took my daughter and then we just went to a park and she's really introverted and shy and she made a new friend. And I was just so happy to spend my day that
Yes.
way, taking just 5 hours to have this quality moment with her. And so right now, that's my focus. I have built something that is functional. I'm still working through my network to create more opportunities for corporate training and for one-on-one coaching. I every time I go on a training, I bring in another coach. So I'm also
Mm,
sharing that wealth that I'm gaining with someone else. I
hmm.
call them my freelancer and I pay them like an amount of the amount that I'm gaining. I'm so
Yeah.
focused on giving back because I feel very grateful for everything that I have received so far. And
Wow.
sometimes people are just so kind and generous. I remember talking to someone and saying, I just want to create donations for what's going on in Palestine. I'm trying to use my coaching, but it's kind of slow. And the person said, can you record yourself giving a masterclass? I'll produce it for you. No money. And I was like, why would you do that? And the person said, well, I love what you're doing. I love that cause. It touches my heart. I want to help. And so just putting yourself out there, putting the values will connect you with people, in ways you couldn't even
Wow.
expect. I could be just planning behind my laptop the whole day. I could be doing that, like planning, I'm going to do this at this hour and I'm going to, just, do more mails and do. And now I'm just realizing I have to be intentional about the way I spend my time. So for me, there's this space where I'm with my clients, and that is really how I live a life of purpose. And then there's that space where I'm taking care of my business.
Of
I'm a
course.
mom, and I'm a new mom. So in a way, I'm always thinking about my daughter, how I'm very intentional with the time I want to spend with her. I try to do that for my business. I just
Mm.
imagine, my business is this really kind of growing, fragile, vulnerable thing that I want to take care of. So I keep on asking myself, what would be great for the business? What would make the business grow in a healthy way? What would be sustainable? Because I don't want to just, jump into doing things out of stress or anxiety or fear. And then the third part is this philanthropic part. And this is where I know that our words meet. I just keep on asking myself, how can I give for free? Can I give coaching for free? Can I give a seminar for free?
Right.
And those are the three spaces I try to be, juggling between. And I'm learning. I mean, I made mistakes in the first months. For example, the first time someone told me to explain my work, I gave him a free coaching. And then that free coaching lasted for like a few sessions. And then I realized, Sally, your work is valuable. If you're going to give free coaching, it should be to someone who cannot afford it. So I am more than happy to offer free coaching to younger people. I'm more than happy to offer
I
free
love it.
coaching to people in really complicated, political or geographical spaces. But it shouldn't be just because someone is earning really a lot of money in a big company, and just because they're like, oh, I don't know what neuroscience is, or I don't know what EI is. So now I'm also being very intentional. My time is precious. I'm
Absolutely.
not just throwing my time away like that, because if I do, I want to do philanthropy. I don't want
Me
to just
too.
offer free coaching to people who are earning a lot of money, but who are not willing to put in the investment. And because I'm
Yeah.
really kind and I'm really empathetic, it was a challenge for me
Uh,
at the beginning,
but
but I'm learning.
you learned it's the same thing with me. My time is very valuable. When I started coaching, I was doing things, my schedule was getting too full. I defeated the purpose of my designed life, which is to have time freedom and be able to control my schedule. So now I'm in a position where, for example, I've cleared my schedule for all of August and September to lean into traveling with my family and my friends. I'm leaving tomorrow, actually. I'm flying to Amman, Jordan tomorrow to kind of start travels and stuff like that. When
Amazing.
when people jump out of the 9 to 5 or jump into something, what I encourage people to think through is you don't want to leave a 9 to 5 to go create another one. That's not the point.
Mm.
We do that too quickly. I have a client who left corporate, bought a franchise here, which is called, I think you probably have Subway sandwiches, but he bought a Subway sandwich here and ended up buying six more, but he created another 9 to 5 for himself. So now we're
Mm.
pulling him out of the business, giving up 30% of the revenue to get a partner so he can go live life and explore. You are clearly living your life and exploring what it's meant to be human. And that's why I wanted to track you down. I'm glad I ran into you on LinkedIn, and I'm glad that we finally connected. So I want to thank you for coming on the podcast.
I want to thank you for just doing what you do. You really did offer me perspective when I had none. And now I can say this from a pure neuroscience perspective. Our brain needs models. So we either have someone who has modeled something to us and we are able to access that model, or we need to be, courageous enough to create it for ourselves. And I
Right.
remember I had no models. I didn't know anyone who had left their corporate job to start living a life of purpose, and who was curious and ambitious enough, and who also wanted to make money, but also wanted to do philanthropy. Like, it was a lot of
It's a lot of
unique
pieces.
things. It's a lot of pieces. It's not just one piece. So I was so, so happy to hear you speak on that podcast. And I remember my brain thinking, well, someone else has done it, so it should be possible. Just give it a try. And we
I
all
love it.
need models. And I love this podcast because this is what people get. You listen in and you get just another story of another model, and the stories are so different and the people are so different, and we are all in different businesses. And I don't even think it is about the business. I mean,
Oh,
neuroscience is my thing, behavioral science is my passion. Yours could be anything else, and your process could be different. Maybe there's no Google and there's no Microsoft. And honestly, the whole thing that I get from this story is checking in with ourselves and having a network. And by network, I mean I was always helping people without having anything in mind. And now these people are showing up for me in ways I could not have imagined. So just be genuinely kind. I'm really done with hearing people say that kindness can be actually a problem or a challenge in the work that we do in terms of entrepreneurship. I don't agree. I mean, kindness is the value I hold
everything.
really, really close to my heart. And it is everything. It's why me and you are talking. The post I
100%.
commented, it was
Mm.
when you were talking about your parents. And I told you, I worry about mine too. That's how we connected, Maurice. Kindness, nothing else.
I I I I have two kids. They have three responsibilities. One is to be happy. I'm not worried about people's definite, just be happy.
Mm,
Two, they have to be good people, which I mean kind. I don't
mm,
need them to be great. I don't need my boys to be Nelson Mandela or Barack Obama or Gandhi or whatever, or whoever you might think is great. LeBron James. I don't care. Just have to be good and kind to people, because
mm,
the more you are kind, not only to people, but to the world. So we'll pick up trash and we'll do things like that, because the more you're kind to the world and all the beautiful things that are living on it, the more kindness will come back to you. Although we shouldn't be doing it for that purpose, but it tends to be. But the last thing goes back to practicality. The last thing I tell them goes back to practicality, which is they have to learn how to make money grow.
I love that.
My freedom has come from my insatiable curiosity starting at age 21 about passive income and generating revenue such that you could go live life the way that we are intended to live life. And it goes back to how you finished up the conversation today, where you went through this journey, your thought process, your
Mm,
heart set, skill set, and soul set led you to this emotional
mm,
work. But there is a practicality to it of starting the business and
yeah.
feeling it out. Folks should just do it, whatever it is you want to do, just do it and course correct along the way. You're never going to totally understand every single aspect of what it means to start an online coaching business or do real estate or be a pottery person, or you just have to do it and it will come along at some point. You have clearly done it. And you're right. We do need models. And thank you for saying that I'm a model for some. You are clearly a model for people. They're going to hear your story. And if I can ever help you with your coaching stuff, or would you call it a guest coach or something, I'm here for you anytime you need.
Oh, wow. I would love that.
Yeah,
I'll
man.
take you on that offer.
Of course, I'll use my French and everything. But it's been a pleasure to have you on, and I look forward to meeting you in person too.
Me too. Thank you,
All right.
Maurice.
Talk to you soon. Hey guys, this is Maurice, host of the Try Life On podcast, and thank you for listening to another episode. I hope you are finding it useful and helping you design your own lifestyle that you don't need a vacation from. If that's the case, please consider dropping a review for me, whether in Apple, iTunes, or in Spotify. Drop a review, put some stars on it, give me some feedback on how I can make the podcast better, what information you are looking for. I am doing my best to get information to you on the Try Life On principles, the 5 freedoms, how to build lifestyle, travel hacking, all of it. And I want to do it for you. So please do a review for me. And until next time, my name is Maurice Philogene, and this is the Try Life On podcast. Peace.